Audiobook number 5.
In the RV Family series.
Part 2. The continuation of Audiobook 4. And now, Chapter 9. Trapped in the Courthouse.
They ducked behind crates, crouching in the musty darkness, breaths held like secrets.
The footsteps grew louder, heavier. Then came voices. Deep, confident, dangerous.
Judah's sharp, gravelly tone cut through the still air.
We should have sealed this place off years ago.
Then Malachi, slower, like syrup over broken glass.
No, we need to keep inventory.
The gold stays hidden until the buyer comes.
After that, we vanish.
Mayo's heart pounded like a drum.
A buyer? This wasn't just about hoarding, it was a full-blown heist. They were planning to sell the town's fortune right out from under it.
This feels like a terrible time to mention I really have to pee, Meatball whispered into Mayo's mind. Shuh, Mayo hissed softly, curling tighter into the shadows behind the crates.
Jesse peeked over a crate, eyes locked on the safe. He mouthed to Mayo, "We need that combo." They waited as the brothers moved deeper into the room, inspecting the crates.
One of them opened the safe.
Mayo saw it. The code was scratched into the metal lip, hidden unless the door was open. 37-12-89. Mayo burned it into his brain. Suddenly, clunk. Robbie dropped one of his harmonicas. Everyone froze. The sound echoed like thunder.
Malachi turned, flashlight beams slicing the dark.
"Who's there?" They ran.
Out of the basement, through the old halls, Jesse leading the way like a shadow.
They sprinted for the loose window, but Judah was faster.
He cut them off in the corridor with a sneer and a shotgun in hand.
"Where do you kids think you're going?"
They stopped short,
panting.
Ellie stood in front of Robbie, shielding him.
Jesse clenched his fists. But Mayo stepped forward. Calm, brave, quiet.
"You won't shoot us," he said.
Judah raised an eyebrow.
"Won't I?"
"You'd rather we disappear like the others, right?"
"But if you hurt us now, the sheriff will have to explain a lot more than missing treasure." Malachi appeared behind him, slow and cold-eyed.
"You don't know what you're talking about, boy." "I know there's a buyer coming," Mayo said.
"And I know the town has a right to its gold."
The brothers looked at each other, just a flicker of hesitation. "Mayo," Meatball whispered, "this is one of those times when I'd love to bite someone if you gave the word." But then crack.
Zeus.
From out of nowhere, the old pit bull barreled through a side door and straight into Judah's leg like a furry battering ram. Judah stumbled.
The shotgun skittered across the floor.
Mayo shouted, "Run!" They did. Through the halls, out the window, into the night. Safe. For now. Back at the RV, under the stars, the kids regrouped. Mayo took out the notebook and scribbled the safe combination and everything they'd seen. "We have the truth," he said. "We just have to find the right way to tell it." Jesse leaned back against the picnic table, a smirk on his face. "You've got guts, little bro." Mayo grinned. "Takes one to know one."
Meatball yawned dramatically.
"Well, I survived corrupt lawmen, flying harmonicas, and an old dog stampede. I deserve steak." "You deserve a bath," Ellie said with a laugh.
The stars twinkled above the hill.
Quiet for now. But Mayo knew this mystery wasn't over. It was just beginning. Chapter 10. The Town That Whispers. Morning in the hill came with the smell of biscuits and the sound of horseshoes clinking on cobblestone.
The town moved slow, like a secret keeping itself.
But Mayo didn't feel slow. He felt sharp, awake, ready. He sat at the picnic table outside the RV with Meatball asleep under the bench, snoring softly through his one good ear. Jesse was inside eating cereal. Robbie was drawing a comic where Meatball was a detective. Landon and Ellie were on their way over. Mayo was flipping through his notebook again, organizing everything they knew.
The tunnels ran beneath every important building in the hill. The gold had been hidden for years, kept secret by Malachi and Judah. The brothers were planning to sell it all and disappear.
The townspeople? Most were poor, tired, and suspicious, but not evil. Just scared. And one other thing, the whispers. That's what the old man had called them before he died. The town whispers, boy, he'd said. But you gotta listen. At the time, Mayo thought it was just old man talk. But now, it felt like something more. Ellie and Landon arrived with Zeus, who walked slow but proud, like he knew he was a hero. Everyone in town's talking, Ellie said. The sheriff says a raccoon broke into the courthouse last night. Mayo smirked. Guess we're raccoons now. Landon handed Mayo a folded paper. You need to see this. It was a missing person flyer. An older man. Faded eyes. A name Mayo didn't recognize. But there was a symbol drawn in the corner. The seal of the hill. Not printed, scratched. Like someone added it. Ellie pointed to the corner. It's on every flyer in town. All the missing folks. All of them connected. They all knew something, Mayo said. They heard the town whisper. Meatball opened one eye. Okay, now I'm listening. Whispers, secret codes, spooky posters. This is officially very mystery why. Mayo tucked the flyer into his notebook. I think the people who disappeared were trying to warn the town. But how do we get the town to listen? Ellie asked. Mayo thought for a moment. We show them the truth. And I think I know where we can start. They headed into town disguised as tourists. Landon wore a straw hat. Ellie had an oversized camera. Robbie carried Meatball in a backpack with sunglasses on his snout. Jesse met them near the town square, leaning against a lamppost like a spy in a movie. The mayor's hosting a town gathering at noon, Jesse said. It's supposed to be about revitalizing the economy. Probably their way of announcing the gold sale. Perfect, Mayo said. That's our stage. Stage for what? Jesse asked. Mayo pulled out a flash drive. Security footage. From the courthouse. Jesse copied it last night before we ran. You're welcome, Jesse said, smug. We're going to show the town who's really stealing from them, Mayo said. But we need help. That help came from the people who had been listening. Mr. Green, the librarian. Miss Dot, the baker. Old Hank, who ran the blacksmith museum. Quiet folks. Honest folks. People who remembered when the hill had heart. They met in secret behind the mill, sharing old stories and quiet anger. And when noon came, the whole town packed into the square. Malachi stood tall on the platform, looking down like a king. Judah stood beside him, smirking. Mayo stepped forward. His heart was beating so loud he thought Meatball might hear it. Before you say anything, Mayo called out, maybe the town should see something first. Jesse hit play on a projector borrowed from the museum. The footage lit up the old brick wall behind Malachi. The crates of gold. The safe. The whispers. People gasped. Others shouted. Malachi's face went red. Judah reached for his side, but the sheriff's badge was gone. Someone in the crowd had already taken it. Mr. Green stepped forward. We want our town back. Mist raised her voice. We want the truth. And just like that, the hill whispered no more. It roared. That night, the town was different. Brighter. Malachi and Judah were arrested. The gold was locked in a vault, this time with everyone holding the key. Plans were made to rebuild the town square, start a school fund, and fix the broken well. People smiled again. And Mayo? He sat on the roof of the RV, staring at the stars. Meatball flopped down beside him. You did it, kid. Mayo smiled. We did it. Where to next? Meatball asked. Mayo looked toward the road. Wherever there's trouble. Chapter 11. Packing up and saying goodbye. The sun peeked over the hills like it didn't want to say goodbye either. Mayo sat at the picnic table outside the RV, drinking hot cocoa and watching a horse-drawn cart roll past the town gates for the last time. The hill was already changing. The crooked had been cleared out, and the quiet folks had found their voice. He looked down at his notebook, now full of scribbles, secrets, clues, and crossed-out theories. He closed it gently and smiled.
Another mystery solved. Inside the RV, Mom was organizing their cupboards with military precision. Dad was on a work call about his next government job, already mentioning some tiny place in Oregon called Crater Fork. Robbie was out front drawing with chalk on the pavement. Him, Mayo, Jesse, Meatball, and Zeus standing on a hill made of gold. Meatball lay in the sun, chewing an old glove he had found 3 towns back. Ellie and Landon sat nearby, their backpacks slung across their shoulders.
"So you're really leaving today?" Landon asked.
"Yeah," Mayo said. Dad's contract wrapped up fast after everything went down.
Ellie raised an eyebrow.
And after the mayor and sheriff got hauled away in a tomato cart.
Mayo grinned.
That probably helped. They sat in silence for a bit, letting the morning breathe. Then Zeus stood slowly, his gray muzzle low to the ground. He walked to Mayo and placed his head against his knee. "You've done well, young one," Zeus said in that slow, steady voice that sounded like rain on old tin.
"You listened. You cared. That's what makes a true seeker."
Mayo swallowed the lump in his throat.
"Thanks, Zeus.
You taught me a lot." "Keep listening, even when it's quiet," Zeus added. "Especially then." Landon scratched Zeus behind the ears.
"You sure you don't want to take him with you?"
Mayo shook his head.
"He belongs here.
They all need him." Ellie stood and handed Mayo something, a hand-drawn map of the hill with an X marking their hideout behind the mill.
"So you don't forget us."
"I won't," Mayo said.
"But I probably will," Meatball added. "I forget where I bury things all the time."
Landon laughed. Robbie came over and hugged Ellie. She hugged him back, and then all the kids piled together in one big, tangled hug. Even Meatball tried to wedge in. Later, as the RV pulled away from the campground, Mayo leaned out the window.
Ellie and Landon stood waving at the gates.
Zeus sat between them like a statue.
"You okay?"
Jesse asked from the passenger seat.
Mayo nodded.
"Yeah, just thinking." "Dangerous," Jesse said, tossing him a bag of snacks. Mom turned on the radio, Meatball flopped into Mayo's lap, and the road opened in front of them like a story waiting to be told.
Mayo reached into his backpack and pulled out a fresh notebook.
He opened to the first page and wrote.
Rattlesnake Flats was the end of something.
The hill was the beginning.
I don't know what comes next, but I'm not afraid of the road anymore, because I've got Meatball. I've got my brothers, and I've got a gift.
Meatball looked up at him.
"Does this next place have snacks?"
"Probably," Mayo said, smiling. The Wexler RV rumbled forward, chasing the horizon. Chapter 12, Welcome to Crater Fork. The drive into Crater Fork, Oregon, felt like entering a forgotten page in an old picture book. Tall pines lined the winding road like watchful giants. The fog hung low, curling around the RV like steam off a hot cup of cocoa. Mayo pressed his face to the window as they rolled into a clearing where an old wooden sign greeted them. "Welcome to Crater Fork Estate 1888 population, 412, not including ghosts."
"That's comforting," Jesse muttered. Meatball popped his head up from the floor and squinted at the sign. "I don't like places that advertise their ghosts. It's like bragging about having termites."
"Maybe it's a joke," Mayo offered, though he didn't sound convinced. The RV pulled into a gravel parking area beside a small general store and cafe. Across the street stood the Crater Fork Welcome Center, though it looked more like a one-room schoolhouse with a rusty bell on top and shutters that creaked when the wind passed. Dad turned off the engine.
"Okay, folks.
I've got a meeting in town with the mayor about some infrastructure assessment, bridges, logging permits, all that good stuff." Translation, Jesse whispered to Mayo, "He's going to be super bored while we find trouble." Mom and Dad went into the Welcome Center. Mayo, Jesse, and Robbie stepped into the cool, forest-scented air. Meatball followed, sniffing the gravel. Crater Fork wasn't like the hill.
There were no gas lamps or cobblestone streets. But there was something else, something still and strange.
Everything felt paused. A woman passed by walking her dog, who barked once at Meatball and then kept walking, her eyes low. A man sweeping the porch of the post office paused to stare at them just a second too long. Everyone seems polite, Robbie said. But weird polite. Meatball's nose twitched. Friendly on the outside. Nervous on the inside. I've seen this before. Small town with a big secret. Just then, a boy rode up on a bike, probably about Mayo's age. He wore muddy jeans and a patched-up hoodie with a fishing rod strapped to the handlebars. "You guys the RV people?" he asked, looking them over. Mayo nodded. "Yeah, I'm Mayo. This is Jesse, Robbie, and Meatball." The boy grinned. "I'm Harper. My grandma owns the campground. She said we got new neighbors." Robbie perked up. "Is the campground haunted?" Harper chuckled. "No, but the lake might be." Everyone stopped. "Wait, really?" Mayo asked. Harper leaned on his handlebars. "People say if you go out on the water after sunset, you can hear singing. Like lullabies. Weird, echoey lullabies." Jesse raised a brow. "And people still swim in it?" Harper shrugged. "Not after what happened last year." Mayo stepped closer. "What happened?" Before Harper could answer, a voice called from the store porch. A girl stood there, about 14. Wild red curls, tall hiking boots, a leather satchel slung across her chest. "You're telling ghost stories again, Harper?" she asked. "No one wants to hear about your lake mermaids." "Mermaids?" Mayo and Robbie said at the same time. The girl smirked and walked over. "I'm Junie. I live next to the fire tower." "You're not from around here either, are you?" Mayo asked. She shook her head. "Not originally. But I've been here long enough to know there's something fishy about Crater Fork, and it's not just the trout." That night, they parked the RV in the trees beside the campground. A narrow trail led down to a silvery blue lake that shimmered under the early moonlight. Mayo and Meatball sat near the water's edge. Meatball sniffed the air. "This place feels strange, Mayo." "Yeah," Mayo whispered. "Like something's watching. Or listening." Mayo didn't answer right away, because somewhere across the lake, he thought he heard it. A voice. Soft. Singing. Like a lullaby. Chapter 13. The Lullaby Lake. The sound was faint, just enough to raise goosebumps on Mayo's arms. It floated across the still water like a breeze made of notes. A woman's voice, high and soft, singing a song without words. It faded in and out, like it was being carried by the lake itself. Meatball's ears perked up. "Did you hear that?" Mayo nodded. "I think so." "Good. Because if only I heard it, we'd be dealing with either ghosts or expired kibble hallucinations." They stayed quiet a little longer, listening. But the singing didn't come back. Just the sound of crickets and the occasional splash of a fish. "Let's head back," Mayo said, brushing dirt from his jeans. Back at the RV, Jesse was showing Robbie how to roast marshmallows on a flickering campfire. Mom was inside reading a book, and Dad was still on his laptop, tapping away at whatever secret government maps or spreadsheets he always seemed glued to. "You hear anything weird down at the lake?" Jesse asked as Mayo plopped beside him. Mayo hesitated. "Weird how?" "You know. Singing. Ghost howls. Soggy banjo music." "Just crickets," Mayo lied. Jesse raised a brow, but let it drop. He passed Mayo a marshmallow instead. The next morning, Mayo met Harper and Junie down by the general store. Junie had her satchel again, this time filled with a small notebook, a flashlight, and a pair of old binoculars. "Are we going to the lake?" Mayo asked. Junie nodded. "I've been keeping a log of weird stuff. The singing's real. I've heard it too. Always at night. Never the same song twice." Harper rolled up on his bike. "And I brought my fishing rod, just in case the lake wants to offer us a clue. Or dinner." The three of them hiked back down the path to the lake, Zeus padding along beside them slowly, and Meatball bouncing in and out of the grass like a marshmallow-colored rabbit. Junie led them to a cluster of boulders near the water's edge.
I found something weird here last week, she said, crouching and brushing away some pine needles. Check it out. Underneath, carved into the stone, was a spiral. Not like the dangerous spirals from Rattlesnake Flats, but still eerie, smooth and deep, almost glowing in the morning light. Mayo knelt beside it and placed his fingers on the groove. A flash popped into his head. Not a picture, not a voice, a feeling. Sadness, like a mother mourning a child, or a song trapped under ice. He pulled his hand back quickly. You okay? Junie asked. Yeah, Mayo said. It's just weird. That rock's not just weird, Meatball whispered. It's watching us. Zeus growled low. His wise old eyes stared across the lake. Harper looked over too. You guys see that? Out in the middle of the lake, a dark shape was floating. At first, Mayo thought it was a log, but it moved against the current. Then it was gone, vanished under the surface like it had never been there. Later that night, Mayo couldn't sleep. Not because of the noise. The campground was quiet. Too quiet. He sat on his bunk with Meatball curled against his side. The spiral was stuck in his head. So was the singing. And that feeling. You think it's a ghost? Mayo whispered. I think whatever it is, Meatball said. It's lonely. Mayo glanced at the notebook on his lap. He wrote, There's something in Crater Fork. It sings. It hides. It mourns. I don't think it's evil. I think it needs help. Outside the RV, the lake shimmered under the moon again. And then, so soft you could barely tell if it was real. The singing began again. Chapter 14. The Whisper Beneath the Water. The next morning, Mayo woke with the singing still echoing in his mind. It hadn't been a dream, he was sure of it now. And whatever was making that sound, it wasn't trying to scare anyone. It felt more like a cry for help. Robbie was already awake, eating cereal and talking to Meatball like it was the most normal thing in the world. She's singing again, huh? Robbie asked, crunching loudly. Mayo blinked. Wait, you heard it too? Robbie nodded, swinging his legs off the dinette bench. Only a little. Sounded sad. Meatball licked his paw dramatically. If this keeps up, I'm going to need earplugs for my good ear. Do you think she's real? Mayo whispered. Meatball shrugged. Ghosts. Spirits. Echoes. Maybe it's just the wind whistling through someone's mistakes. That settled it. Mayo needed answers. That afternoon, he met Junie and Harper near the lake. They brought sandwiches, a tape recorder, and a small, inflatable raft Harper insisted had never popped in a dangerous situation. I say we go out to the middle, Harper said, tossing the raft into the water. That's where we saw the shadow, right? Junie tied her curls back. Let's not fall in. Crater Lake's freezing, even in summer. Mayo hesitated as he stepped into the raft. Zeus stayed on shore, watching quietly. Meatball jumped in like he was made of rubber. Why do I always end up in situations that involve things I can't swim in? Meatball mumbled. They paddled slowly, the lake silent around them except for the drip of water off the oars and the occasional plunk of a fish. Junie set the tape recorder in the center of the raft and pressed record. Then they waited. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. 20 minutes. Stillness. Harper started eating a sandwich. Maybe the lake ghost sleeps in on weekends. And then, a ripple. A whisper. The water shifted, just slightly, beneath them. And the singing started. Faint. Right under the boat. Mayo leaned over the edge and peered into the depths. For a moment, he thought he saw a face. Pale. Woman-shaped. Eyes closed. Hair drifting like underwater smoke. Then it vanished. The tape recorder spun. Junie's hand flew to it. It's picking up something. But then the raft gave a sudden, lurching wobble. Thump. Something had touched the bottom. They all froze. Thump. Thump. Harper grabbed the oars. Okay, time to go. As he paddled furiously, the singing faded. The lake calmed. And something small, wooden,
floated up beside them. Junie reached out and caught it. A little box, about the size of a lunch tin. The metal edges were rusted, but the lock was still intact. Mayo stared at it. "I think the lake gave us a gift," he whispered. Back on dry land, they gathered under the trees as Mayo gently cracked the box open with a rock. Inside were 3 things. A locket with a faded picture of a woman and a little girl. A brittle, yellowed piece of paper with a song written on it in looping cursive. A name carved into the lid. Isadora Vane. Junie's mouth fell open. Isadora Vane? That's the name of the mayor's great-grandmother. Harper blinked. "How do you know that?" "I read a plaque in the town hall last week. It said she drowned in this lake 100 years ago." Mayo turned the paper over. On the back, a line was scribbled in pencil. They hid her voice. They hid the truth. But she remembers. Meatball sniffed the locket. "Looks like this mystery just got a whole lot deeper." Literally. Chapter 15. A Voice Lost to Time. Back at the RV park, the little tin box sat on the Wexler's fold-out table like a secret trying not to be heard. Mayo stared at the photo inside the locket again. The woman in the picture, Isadora Vane, had kind eyes. The girl beside her looked a lot like Ellie. Same nose. Same spark in the eyes. "I think the lake's trying to tell us something," Mayo said. "No kidding," Meatball said. "A ghost sings to us, and a 100-year-old box floats up from the depths. Pretty soon we'll be talking to haunted frogs." Junie traced the name carved in the lid. Isadora Vane wasn't just anyone. She was part of the founding family of the hill. Harper leaned forward. And if she drowned under strange circumstances, then someone might have helped her drown, Mayo finished. They all sat quietly after that. Even Meatball didn't crack a joke. That night, Mayo waited until the RV was quiet before slipping out with Meatball and his flashlight. He walked to the edge of the woods where the trees thinned near the water. The moon was high and silver. The lake looked like glass. He held the locket in his hand. Not for any real reason, just instinct. "I don't know if you can hear me," he said softly to the air. "But we're listening. And we want to help." Meatball tilted his head, his one good ear twitching. Then Mayo heard it. A whisper, not a voice, but a thought. It wasn't in words. More like a feeling again. Trapped. Wronged. Forgotten. He squeezed the locket tighter. The wind picked up and leaves rustled around him. The surface of the lake rippled. Then the flashlight flickered. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw someone, standing at the edge of the dock. A tall figure in an old-fashioned dress, staring across the lake. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and her head was bowed. "Isadora," Mayo whispered. The figure turned. She didn't move toward him. She didn't speak. But in his mind, Mayo felt one clear message. Not alone. Then she vanished, like a breath in the cold. The next day, Mayo told Junie and Harper everything. "I think she's stuck here," he said. "And she wants people to know what really happened." They brought the box into the town's tiny museum, just one long hallway inside the old post office. Junie convinced the caretaker to let them look at records from the 1910s. And there it was. A water-stained newspaper clipping from July 1912. Local woman drowns in crater Fork Lake. Isadora Vane, widow and song teacher, found lifeless near shore. Ruled accidental. But scribbled in pencil on the back of the article were 2 names. Malachi. Judah. Junie's eyes went wide. That's the same Malachi and Judah who run the town now. Harper nodded slowly. And they would have been her grandsons. Or great-nephews, maybe. "They've been here a long time," Mayo said. "And they've been hiding this just as long," Meatball added. Zeus, who had wandered into the museum and laid down on the cool tile floor, let out a soft sigh. The puzzle was getting clearer. And deeper. Back at the lake that evening, Mayo placed the locket on the dock. He didn't say anything. He just sat beside it with Meatball. After a few minutes, a breeze picked up. The water shifted.
and a single note of music drifted through the air, just one. But it was beautiful. A goodbye. And a thank you.
Chapter 16. A Deal in the Dark.
Night fell heavy over the hill.
The sky was a deep navy blanket, dotted with stars, but something about the town didn't feel peaceful.
Mayo could sense it in the air.
A hum, a tension, like the land was waiting for something to snap. The old diner down the road from the museum glowed faintly in the distance.
Mayo had been there once with Dad and Jessie. They'd served grilled cheese and root beer floats like it was still 1910.
But tonight, it looked different. Shadows moved in the window. People inside.
But no music, no plates clinking, no laughter.
Just murmurs. Junie tugged Mayo's sleeve as they crouched behind a fence near the alley.
I told you something was off.
The sheriff's in there, she whispered.
And so is Malachi.
Harper peeked through a crack in the wood. Looks like they're meeting with some folks.
I think that's the banker. And the guy from the general store. Mayo frowned. They're making a deal.
Junie nodded.
Maybe the same kind of deal they made 100 years ago. Crooked town, crooked family, crooked history, Meatball muttered. Zeus stood beside them, calm as ever, staring toward the diner like he was seeing more than any of them could. Then click. The back door opened. 2 men came out. One was Sheriff Judah.
The other was carrying a worn leather briefcase.
They talked in hushed tones. Mayo strained to listen. Mine's sealed off next week, the man said. You sure no one's poking around? Judah smirked. Let the kids chase ghost stories. We'll be long gone by the time anyone notices what's missing. They both laughed.
Then the door closed again. Mayo's heart pounded.
They're sealing off something, he said.
A mine.
Maybe that's where the gold is.
Harper looked stunned.
You think they're about to take it all? Mayo nodded. And I think they'll do anything to make sure no one stops them. Later that night, back at the RV, Mayo paced the gravel lot behind their camper. He couldn't sleep.
The conversation from the diner looped in his mind.
He looked up at the stars. They didn't blink, just stared back. You're thinking loud again, Meatball said from a nearby chair. Want me to tell you what you're thinking? Mayo half smiled. You already know, don't you? You want to stop them.
Expose the whole dirty mess.
Save the town. Maybe even help a ghost get some justice. Mayo nodded. But what if we can't? He said quietly. What if we're just kids? Meatball stretched and yawned. You're not just anything, Mayo. You've got more courage than most grown men. And a better nose, too, thanks to me. Mayo laughed softly. Then he stopped.
Because far off in the distance, beyond the RV park, a light flickered near the hills.
A lantern. Someone was heading toward the abandoned mines. Chapter 17. Into the Mine. Mayo didn't wait. He grabbed his flashlight, zipped his hoodie, and tapped softly on the bunk where Robbie was sleeping. Hey, wake up. Robbie blinked. What, uh-huh?
It's the middle of the night.
Mayo leaned in. There's someone heading toward the old mine. I think it's Malachi and Judah. They're gonna take the gold. Robbie sat up fast. You're going. I have to. Meatball's coming too.
As if I'd let you bumble into a haunted mine without supervision, Meatball grumbled, already stretching.
Wait for me, Robbie said, hopping down and pulling on his sneakers. 5 minutes later, the brothers slipped out of the RV and met Junie, Harper, and Landon by the gate. Zeus stood at Landon's side, still and silent, like a statue carved from the night. Junie held up a backpack. Snacks, ropes, flashlights, and a crowbar. Harper grinned. The mystery gang rides again. Mayo led the way through the woods. The light ahead bobbed now and then, like a ghostly firefly moving deeper into the hills. They reached the mine entrance just as the lantern disappeared down a slope tunnel. The wooden beams around the entrance were rotted and leaning. A faded sign hung loosely on 2 rusted nails. Do not enter. Unstable ground. Mayo swallowed hard. Everybody ready? Robbie nodded bravely. Let's do it. Meatball muttered. If I get buried alive, I'm haunting someone's sock drawer forever. They stepped inside. The mine was cold, damp, and smelled like forgotten earth. Their flashlights cut through the dark and thin, shaky beams. Every now and then, they heard the sound of dripping water. The deeper they went, the more the air changed, heavy, like it remembered secrets. Then they saw it. Up ahead, in a large open chamber, stood Malachi and Judah. They were both in work clothes, and Malachi held a crowbar in one hand while Judah knelt beside a slab of old wood. Next to them was a pit. A deep one. Mayo motioned for everyone to stay low. He crouched behind a stack of old mine carts. I told you this place still held it, Malachi was saying. Gold veins running under the hill. The maps were right. Judah nodded. We load what we can tonight. Seal it tomorrow. Blame the collapse on vandals. That's when Zeus let out a low growl. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Malachi snapped up his head. Who's there? Judah pulled a revolver from his belt. Show yourselves, he barked. Junie stepped out first, raising both hands. You're not getting away with this. Mayo followed. The town deserves to know the truth. Judah laughed. And who's going to believe a bunch of kids? Suddenly, a voice echoed behind them, deep and commanding. I will. Mr. Wexler stepped into the mine, holding up a small government-issued camera. Behind him came 2 local deputies. We've been listening for the past 10 minutes, Mr. Wexler said. Smile, Malachi. You're on tape. It all happened fast after that. The brothers were arrested. The mine was sealed, for real this time, with the gold marked for preservation and historical restoration. Turns out, the government had suspected corruption for years, but never had proof. Mayo and his crew handed it to them on a silver platter. Or rather, a golden one. Later, back at the RV park, Mayo sat on the roof with Meatball, watching the stars. Another mystery solved, he said. And no one even fell in a pit this time, Meatball replied. Mayo smiled. You ever think, maybe we were meant to do this? What? Sneak into dangerous places and uncover 100-year-old crimes. Yeah, Mayo said. Exactly that. Meatball looked up at the stars, then closed his eyes. Well, if we were, we're pretty darn good at it. Chapter 18. Goodbye to the Hill. The sun rose soft and golden over the hills, casting long shadows across the quiet town. For the first time since they'd arrived, the hill felt calm. No tension in the air. No secrets pressing down from every corner. Just morning light and the smell of dust after a storm. Mayo sat at the picnic table outside the RV, sipping a warm mug of cocoa his mom had made. Robbie sat beside him, dipping toast into his hot chocolate. Meatball snored gently beneath the bench, his leg twitching like he was dreaming of a good chase. Zeus lay a few feet away, quiet and still as usual, his cloudy eyes following a squirrel across a power line. I still can't believe your dad showed up at the mine, Robbie said. I can, Mayo answered. He always knows more than he lets on. Their mom came out of the RV holding a stack of folded clothes and smiled. Boys, the laundry's done, and we'll be hitting the road after breakfast. Robbie groaned. Already? Mayo looked toward town. He wasn't sure if he was ready to say goodbye either. Not yet. They took one last walk into the hill. Mayo, Robbie, Junie, Harper, Landon, Zeus, and Meatball, through the cobblestone streets and past the shops where horse-drawn carriages now came and went without the same heaviness in their wheels. The townsfolk were different too. Friendlier. Lighter. People smiled at them now. Some even waved. Word had gotten out fast. The crooked mayor and his sheriff brother were gone. The town could breathe again. The kids stopped at the edge of the old town square. We did good, Junie said, folding her arms. We sure did, Harper replied, even if we nearly got buried alive. Landon looked at Mayo. You'll keep in touch, right? Mayo nodded. Of course. He looked at Zeus, who stepped forward and gave Meatball a slow, respectful nod. The two dogs stood still for a second, like soldiers in some ancient order passing the torch. "You're a weird old dog," Meatball said. "And you're a loud young one," Zeus replied. Then they both sneezed and walked away like nothing had happened. Back at the RV, Jesse was already in his seat, earbuds in, hoodie up. "You sure you don't want to say bye to your new friends?" Mayo asked. Jesse shrugged. "I'm good. Let's just go." Mayo nodded, but his heart ached a little. Jesse was still distant, still wrestling with things Mayo couldn't hear, at least not clearly. Maybe someday. As the RV rumbled to life and pulled away from the park, the kids stood by the gravel road waving until the Wexlers were just in the distance. Inside the RV, Dad adjusted the rearview mirror and glanced at Mayo. "Proud of you, kid." Mayo smiled. "Thanks, Dad." He looked out the window as the hill disappeared behind them. Another town. Another truth uncovered. Another piece of something bigger. And up ahead, more road. More mystery. More chances to do good. "So what now?" Meatball asked from the back seat. Mayo leaned back and watched the world roll by. "Now," he said, "now we wait for the next adventure." The end.